Our participants are gaining every second, so that's exciting. First of all, welcome. Thank you for being here as much as possible. I hope that you are able to disconnect from all of the stressors, the distractions that you might have in your home space, from your work, and just to, for this moment, be as fully present as you can to engage in community learning this afternoon. My name is Miriam Stephens. I am the Director of Wellness and Support Services for Palo Alto Unified School District. That's a fancy way of saying that I and my team work to support the physical and the emotional, social emotional well-being, as well as the mental health of our students in Palo Alto Unified. It's an awesome job, but it's also a very large one. One of the things I love most about this work is that our community prioritizes social emotional learning and mental health, and really believes that it's not an extra thing, it's the thing that allows us to continue to function. And so today's workshop is really in alignment with that prioritization of our community's social emotional well-being. Today I'm joined by a fantastic collaborative team from our PTA, as well as a community partner, Sarah Kremer from Acknowledge Alliance, and then Betty Loomis, who is our support, and the reason why we are able to function and you were able to hear about this workshop, and also a key hub of support. Should you have any questions to follow up, you can reach out to all of us, but I just want to make sure you see the host and the people who are here to support you to make this the most meaningful experience that it can be. So with a lot of words, we've talked about Q&A. We're going to continue to do that. If you have something that you're bringing into this space that you want to make sure is addressed, please deposit it in that location and we'll utilize that to drive the workshop. So I want to introduce my partners in this collaboration. We have been working together to try to think about what our families and our parents in particular need to cope with the stresses and the additional demands that we are all experiencing right now. One of the key things that we have learned from our work in social emotional learning in Palo Alto is that we cannot give to others what we do not first have for ourselves. And so today's workshop is really designed to address the adult needs in our community first, so that you all are better equipped and more resilient to be able to first be able to manage what's coming with you, and then also be able to be in support of your children and have the space and grace for yourself to be able to help them with their own resilience as we all navigate these really uncertain and uncharted times. I'm going to shift and introduce this partnership. It has been fantastic. Acknowledge Alliance is a community-based organization that has worked in our community for many years, as long as I've been around and longer. Acknowledge Alliance has committed to supporting the social emotional learning development of children. They have been working since 1994 on a mission to promote lifelong resilience in young kids and our rising generation. Part of that mission is to, like today, strengthen the capacity of adults who influence the lives of children, whether they be educators, parents, or community members. Acknowledge Alliance has been supporting our elementary schools, but in addition to that, other elementary schools across the area, and really focuses on social emotional learning and what it takes to develop resiliency in all aspects of our systems. So Acknowledge Alliance, I can't say enough. Most importantly, what I appreciate is that they provide not only intensive support, but they provide direct support to educators who might be struggling. And their partnership has been so adaptive and so creative to be able to step into the needs as they've emerged in our community. So with great gratitude, I welcome Acknowledge Alliance, and in particular, I welcome Dr. Sarah Kremer, who will be our primary presenter today. She is the Director of Resilience Consultation, their program at Acknowledge Alliance, where she oversees the services provided to San Mateo and Santa Clara County schools and organizations to advance prevention, focused mental health, and social emotional learning across an entire school community. So Acknowledge Alliance has consultants like Sarah, but also on-the-ground coaching and training for adults to build out their social emotional curriculum for students, but also their own capacity to adapt to the trying times, as well as the difficulties that we all face in education. So Sarah is a licensed professional clinical counselor, a board-certified art therapist. I've seen some of her work and participated in her workshops. They're really impactful. And in addition, she's on faculty at Notre Dame at Namur University, where she is a newly minted PhD as of a couple of weeks ago. So we're excited to welcome her and call her doctor. Also with us today is Indira. So Indira is representing our PTA. Indira Selva Kumaraswamy has been an amazing community member and longstanding advocate for social emotional learning, in particular at Hoover Elementary. Now she's also graduated up with her children to JLS, but also most importantly across the PTA community. She is our point person for Project Cornerstone, and she is also the parent responsible for building out our infrastructure to support social emotional learning at our schools. Separate from that, she served on our social emotional learning committee. She serves on all kinds of things, anything that's health and well-being. And I am honored to welcome her and call her a friend, but most importantly, a partner in this journey to create solutions to support our families. So Indira, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can speak to our guest.
Thank you, Miriam, for this lovely introduction. And I thank you, Betty, and your team for coming up with this webinar topic at this time of need. PTAC, or the Palo Alto Council of PTAs, is always happy to partner, support, collaborate, and help PAUSD to engage parents and families in all their efforts related to student well-being. I also want to mention that we welcome interested parents to join us on the SEL committee in their school site. More details on this will be shared in the last session. I thank Sarah for coming forward and putting together this webinar for the benefit of all our parents and students. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the attendees who have joined us today for making time to learn more on this important topic. We all know that from many studies and research that social and emotional learning matters a lot and a great deal for important positive life outcomes like success in school, college entry and completion, and even later in life to thrive as successful adults. It is increasingly being recognized that social and emotional skills form the foundation of mental well-being and help immensely in the prevention of mental health crises in our children and youth. So given the current unexpected increase in the stress and anxiety levels in all of us, both adults and children, because of the COVID pandemic, it becomes more relevant that we consciously work towards learning how to alleviate these stressors for our good mental health. And therefore is the need now to talk about one of the most important non-cognitive skills, resilience. This skill gives us the ability to deal with stress, setbacks, crisis, and an array of hardships whenever that confronts us in life. And now, without any further ado, I request Sarah to share with us how we all can learn to build this very important skill within us and in our children. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Sarah Kremer, and I'm just so excited to be here with you and to talk about resilience and how we can build it in ourselves first, then children, families, our communities. What Miriam was saying is especially key to the work that we do with Acknowledge Alliance. It's really important that the adults are managing themselves first. So we're going to talk a little bit about that first. I have some polls to go through. Oops, I lost my, okay, here we go. Let me And before I do the polls, I do want to extend just a gratitude and warm welcome to all of you as parents who are joining us for taking time out of your day, and that you are, really acknowledge that you are interested in learning how to apply more resilience and build more resilience with yourselves and your families. It's really exciting to think about these possibilities with building resilience. And I see, yes, we're having some audio glitches with Indira, so bear with us as we go through that. Okay, so let's try a poll here, just to see kind of who's in the audience. If you can choose which school level that your children, and you can choose more than one option here. Let's see what we're looking at in terms of your participants. All right, we'll give you about 5 more seconds to participate here. Looks like we have quite a few. There we go. We've got quite a few. Oh, pretty good spread. About elementary, high school majority, and middle school right in the middle. Great, thank you. Let's see. So you can see the results here. Elementary school wins out just a little bit. All right, and then let me do. I have a second poll here. Let me know how the last 3 months have been for you. I've got 3 answers. Could be something else as well, but your options are mostly stressful or anxious, mostly wonderful or calm, and then a little bit of both depending on the day. Let's see. Give you about 10 more seconds to vote. Some very interesting results here. Okay, here we go. In the poll, you can see, looks like most of you are saying a little bit of both. Mostly wonderful or calm has the fewest responses, which is not a surprise. I would guess if you felt mostly wonderful and calm, you might not be here on this webinar. You know the secrets to doing this. Okay, and then one last poll. How would you rate your own resilience skills? Needs a little work, a little more support? Pretty good so far? Or do you think that they're getting you through this situation pretty well? Give you about 10 more seconds to take that poll. Getting a really good response right here. Thank you everyone for participating that way. Okay, here we go. End the poll and share the results. Okay, so about half are saying in need of a little work and support, and about half of you feel like you're doing pretty good so far and you're doing well. So if you answered pretty good so far, or getting me through this situation well, I will welcome your secrets, your strategies as we go through this. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's look at the slides here, and I believe that we're going to make these slides available afterwards, so you'll be able to take a look. And you heard a little bit about me. I will say too that with Acknowledge Alliance, we are currently in 4 Palo Alto Unified Schools. We've been providing student counseling at 4 schools, and we made a programmatic decision that we have decided to end our student counseling program in those schools. We won't be back for that service, but we hope that we'll be back to share our social emotional learning curriculum called Project Resilience at those 4 schools and perhaps any other schools. But we've been so excited to work with Palo Alto Unified over the last, I think it's been about 10, 12 years now, and just really appreciate the support that you get from the district at each school, and definitely from this really engaged parent community. So we are really grateful to be partners here with all of you. So this is going to be a 3-part series, and an hour isn't a ton of time, but in general, I'll introduce some basic concepts to the themes of the evening. We'll do some questions and conversations, and then come in and talk a little bit more about some practical strategies. And then a little time at the end if we want to do some more questions and conversations. So as we go through, you are welcome to type in your questions into the Q&A panel. And then when we pause, Miriam will be reading those, and we'll be having a conversation about those questions. Okay, so this is one of my favorite quotes relating to resilience. For a seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. To someone who does not understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. This is a lot about resilience, and resilience isn't always about only experiencing positives or always feeling good. There's adversity in resilience, there's a lot of challenge, but the end results can be pretty amazing. So we're going to start off this session. We're talking a little bit, kind of grounding in what resilience is. So if you have if you'd like to share what you think resilience is, what it means to you, you can share those in the Q&A section here, and then I'll be able to take a look and see what we've got. So what do you think resilience is? I will pause while some people are answering.
So Sarah, we have a couple descriptions: the ability to bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Some people equate that to being a ball or an egg when you drop, and dealing with adversity, make it into something positive, the strength that it takes, the mental reserve to cope with stress, change, adversity.
Beautiful. Okay. I see that this is a well-educated group. Thank you, Miriam. So absolutely, these are all the things I heard, excuse me, are what we talk about when we talk about resilience. Excuse me. The official definition that I really like using is that resilience is a protective process, and it's many different kinds of processes that go towards supporting this phenomenon of competence despite adversity. So when you're faced with adversity, that you can move through and achieve competence. It has to do with the capacities, the strengths, individuality, and uniqueness of each person. And there are a couple different levels where we can look at these processes, including individual level, the family, which might include some close non-family adult relationships like mentors, coaches, or teachers, and then this social environment or community level. So sometimes people think of resilience as the ability to bounce back. That is my next slide. We'll go right there. Bouncing back is really important. However, it's not only up to the individual. This is not something that we want to place on an individual, especially a child, and expect them to become resilient on their own. Resilience takes a village. Resilience takes a family. It takes friends. It takes a school community. It takes a community environment that's all going towards supporting young people. So bouncing back is a great way to talk about it. In our Project Resilience, we often discuss resilience with elementary and middle school students by saying, if you had basketball in one hand or a soccer ball, depending on the school and their interests in sports, and you had an egg, a raw egg in the other, and you were just walking down the street and you were just minding your own business, and then all of a sudden you tripped and you dropped both, and we'd say, what would happen to the egg? The egg hits the ground, shatters, splatters, it's gone. What happens to the basketball or soccer ball? It bounces and then it comes back up. So we want to figure out ways that we can all figure out how to bounce back rather than land on the ground and shatter and splatter and not be whole again. So sometimes when we talk about resilience, it's also important to talk about what's happening for an individual that makes them either more vulnerable or more likely to move into resilience. So sometimes this is called a risks and protective factors model. Some of the vulnerabilities that a person might experience that makes them more at risk of not being able to develop resilience includes living in poverty, experiencing family conflict, maltreatment, violence, abuse, and neglect. It can also be racial discrimination and experiencing systemic and institutional racism. So those are things happening for this person that can translate into a number of different kinds of behaviors and attitudes we see for children and youth. It might look like not engaging in school. It might look like disruptive behavior. It might look like disconnection from a school community. But we also look at the other side with protective factors and some of the resources that we'll be sharing with you. One, the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, they talk about resilience as a seesaw. So you have your risks or vulnerabilities on one side, protective factors or strengths on the other. And we want to kind of have the strengths. Oops, which way do we go? Strengths we have more strengths, so they're a little bit down, more than the vulnerabilities or risks. And some of these strengths look like effective coping skills, self-regulation, confidence, optimism, attachment to attuned, supportive adults. That's one's really important. We're gonna come back to that. Positive, supportive peer relationships, extracurricular activities, and really having this community where children can feel safe. They can experience different kinds of activities, and they know that they feel welcomed, that they belong to that community. So again, we're trying to increase those strengths so that the vulnerabilities aren't so much of a factor. Some of the real important pieces to talk about when we're talking about building resilience too, I have 6 things here. One is this idea of this innate capacity. We all have this ability to build resilience. It's not something that you're born with and then that's it. It's not a fixed level and you reach it or you don't. We all have this chance to continue to develop it throughout our lifetime. Some adversity is helpful as you're building resilience. A moderate amount has been shown to be helpful because it kind of makes sense. If you've had some chances with adversity, you've figured out how to get through that. So you continue to build on those skills, on those strategies to help get you through tough times. However, too much adversity does not mean better resilience. Instead, these are people who need more supports. If you're on that seesaw and your risks or vulnerabilities are greater than protective factors, that's going to be harder for you to achieve and build resilience. The third important concept here is that resilience really focuses on strengths. This is strength-based, looking for what is strong, not what is wrong. What do you bring in so that you can support building of strengths? One of the things we talk about in Project Resilience is this idea that what you pay attention to is what you pay attention to. And so when you're focused on the negative, we have this negativity bias that is just part of how our brains are wired. then you will end up paying attention and you're strengthening these neural connections focused on negativity. When you focus on the positive, it doesn't mean that you are completely ignoring the negative, right? This is not a naive position where everything's great, the sunshine is out, rainbows are appearing, bunnies are jumping in my lap. It's nothing like that. It's this idea that the more that we focus on the positive, then the more likely that we will be able to see the positive in any situation. And that's going to be really important in terms of building resilience. Okay, the next concept is that this is an interaction between biology and environment. So I think I mentioned this briefly. It is not about an individual's characteristics only, and that they are responsible for building their own resilience or not. We're really looking at, and I should say it's also not about only a supportive environment. It's this interaction between the two. So this is going to influence how a young person develops, is what their own capacities, their characteristics, what they are working on, as well as having that support from people in their environment. And then the last concept is this idea that resilience is really impacted by culture. Those who are in the dominant culture often define what resilience looks like and defines the outcomes and even the processes. So for people who are part of the non-dominant culture, they may not have a lot of control over how to get there and how to build resilience. The other piece to think about too is that cultures also get to define what resilience looks like. So if you are here in Palo Alto and your family history is from another culture, how you view resilience might look very different from how resilience is viewed in Palo Alto from people whose families grew up here or grew up in the area. So it's very culturally specific. Okay, but I want to say, and then we'll pause for some questions and conversations. The most important factor for being resilient for children is this optimal functioning of their environments. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask or any comments on what we've done so far, we're going to take a little bit of a pause here and move into those. I will wait for a moment as you're thinking of your questions. As a therapist, I am very good at waiting. Okay, well, this was designed to be very interactive. I don't see any questions coming up so far or any other kind of conversation topics.
So Sarah, there is a question. Oh, your wait time is paying off. Wanting to understand more about what you mean with optimal environments and how we can achieve that, what kinds of things that we can do.
Great. Okay, so we're going to get into some of these ideas when we talk about some strategies. But when we're talking about optimal environment, we want children to feel safe. We want them to be healthy, physically healthy. We want them to be emotionally healthy. We want them to be connected. We want them to be attached to important caregivers in their life, so parents or other family members. We want them to have really positive relationships with their social circles. So that might be with peers, with students in their classroom or across the school. We want them to be connected with their neighborhoods. We want them to feel safe in their neighborhoods and that any adult might be able to help them if they had a need for that. And we want them to live. Sometimes we talk about expectations, of kind of holding high expectations and giving young people the room to fail and to develop and to grow. Those are really important factors in terms of optimal functioning, I think. And some of that also means having the adults in their environment are also functioning well too. So that means that they're taking care of themselves. They have supports, they feel challenged, but not too challenged, and that they are connected with people in their life too.
So that same language is resonating with some of our participants in terms of the idea that adversity is good, it's transformative, it helps us grow stronger. Mm-hmm. And also the difference between stress that can generate change versus stress that can be distressful, right? So not too much, but what's a good balance that you don't grow in your comfort space, you grow in a challenge space. So that's really resonating with folks. Mm-hmm. One of the questions in terms of resilience and what it looks like, there's a question about how resilience can differ across cultures. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of that also speaks to how we view strength and adversity depending on our culture of origin. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's any comments that you'd like to make on that, or Indira as well, but just a good point to talk about in terms of how these considerations can look different.
Mm-hmm. Indira, would you like to jump in?
I hope her sound is working now.
Oh, you gotta unmute yourself first, and then we'll see if your sound is working.
I can speak a little. Growing up in a really multicultural household, and how the culture of origin, or how I appear physically, is very different than the origin of my parents, including my stepfather. And growing up, resiliency, we didn't have the language for that or the words around it. We were just taught to stick to something and keep carrying on, and push through and push down. And I think that mistakenly often can be portrayed as strength, whereas resiliency, as I've grown and done some work for myself as well, there's definitely a need to be able to articulate, yes, pushing through is helpful, but there is a limit to what that pushing through can look like and what you're carrying on, as well as this sense I do value that resiliency in many cultures can highlight the interdependency we have with each other, right? The need to tap into each other, rather than having a global view that's much more centered on ourselves, but is more oriented with our families. That can really help with our resilience in terms of tapping into relationships that help us cope. So I do hear the speaker's point in terms of how it can look different. It resonates with my personal experience, but also know that if we can have consistent language and understanding for our children, it helps them name when things are past that point of adversity for growth, and it becomes distressful. Sometimes if we don't have that common language, the mistake can be made that resilience means you never give up, and you just carry on, and that's definitely not the healthiest approach to all challenges that we face in life.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I've unmuted. Thank you. Yes, culture, resiliency, because of, culture. I think culture does play an important role in the sense, children, when they are young, they are raised in the family and the family values and what their parents are exposed to or what they're aware of. In many, I'll just speak with respect to my experiences. Yes, we looked up into what our parents said, how we should approach a problem, a family issue, or issue or a challenge which I feel if I face at school or in a college or my work life. So the community in where you belong has a sense of they bring those values which they translate or transmit to you as they are helping us cope or learn or teach those values, how to handle incidents and situations. So definitely a family value and the culture where a child comes from or is exposed to does play a bit of a role in how they perceive or view a situation and how they translate that in terms of how they can handle it themselves. Definitely, I would say that it does affect. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to just speak a little bit to that because I'm a Latin American woman and have 4 daughters, and being raised as Latin American, you are taught to hold it in, to be tough, to keep moving, to go on. And I have learned through some very good friends and helpful coworkers to really challenge myself, because allowing yourself to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to know that you're human and not a superhuman can really help in translating to because your children are being raised in this culture. And while I was raised in Mexican culture to be very, very tough, my children, and that's something that's very hard. It's a huge challenge. My children have, because of that, pulled back and not have shared some things and not have been able to or felt comfortable with coming to me for help with building resilience, because I wasn't able to really demonstrate that because I was such a tough wall that would never be cracked no matter what. But I think allowing ourselves to be aware of the cultural differences can really be beneficial to our raising our children and building resilience, and also to be good for us to allow ourselves to just feel and provide a better environment for our kids. And that's all I have to say.
I appreciate you contributing, Betty, as well. I think you're really hitting on this definition that we seem to associate with resilience of strength, right? Of the ability to get back up instead of just carrying through. But sometimes the biggest strength you can demonstrate is when you know the limits of when you've reached your limits and when you need to be vulnerable in the ways that you're describing. I also appreciate that you talk about how to model that vulnerability, but for your daughters, and not wanting to swoop in to solve things, because then that takes away their ability to stretch themselves as well. I wanted to highlight a couple of comments as well from the Q&A.
Yeah.
In terms of more ways, like we're describing right now, to cultivate that resilience, that positive, what can we do explicitly, much like Betty shared and Indira, to cultivate resiliency in our children. And then also, while still keeping healthy boundaries for the child, and not, I'm looking at boundaries, and I hear boundaries a lot of ways in terms of making them responsible for things that are beyond their responsibility or their control, but also, making sure that we're vulnerable in a way that doesn't make them responsible for our feelings too. I think that's important in terms of boundaries. Mm-hmm. I'll pause there and let you all, Sarah, comment on other ways that we can cultivate positive, things we can do positively to cultivate.
Okay, great. And wow, just so appreciative of my colleagues here for sharing their own experiences. Every family is its own culture. And so what you do in your family is not always going to look exactly like what someone else's family looks like too. So really thinking about the positive piece is that you're emphasizing strengths. You're looking for strengths. You're looking for what your children are doing well, what your partners are doing well, what people, in your close social network, looking for what's going well before you are pointing out what's not going well, which is really hard to do when you're feeling stressed. And we have all been under this enormous amount of stress. I haven't really, it's going to come up a little bit in the next, let's move on to the, oh, I forgot to talk about this. Well, we can talk about this as it comes to, as we're seeing this, right, in this global pandemic, political crisis, racial injustice. We've all been going through this over the last couple months. And so I want you to know that when I talk about resilience and we talk about adversity, we have all been challenged in ways that we have not necessarily imagined that this would happen in our lifetimes, and so quickly too. And so for hopefully for most of us, we've been, you know, our routines have been disrupted. We've been staying at home, which is a very, very big challenge for families. And we may have been working from home. You know, at the worst case scenario, we have developed, we've caught the coronavirus. We know loved ones who have also experienced it, job loss, uncertainty about your status in the community. I mean, these are really big challenges that we're dealing with, huge adversities. And as adults, we are trying to manage everything and trying to model that, like how we manage that and model that in front of our children. And as I was kind of coming up with this list of like, what do we see? What have we seen in children, teens, and adults? And I felt like we could almost write everything for each one of these could apply to every category. Inability to focus, 100% that happens to adults as well. Maybe it's just me, but I know I've seen other people, other coworkers going through this. Regressive behaviors, so you start seeing your 5-year-old, things are coming up that maybe they displayed when they were 4 or 3, or someone in middle school might have some elementary school behaviors, high schoolers acting a little bit younger, lack of motivation, of wondering like, why do I have to do this? Increased mental health issues, loneliness or isolation, trouble sleeping, not exercising, you know, really not sure what to do next. A few other things in terms of adolescence, maybe some academic frustrations, maybe frequently angry or disagreeable, feeling that loss of independence and really missing that social time with friends. And for adults, I would just, all of those same things apply, but there might be some changes in how they're parenting, how they're interacting with coworkers, especially online. There might be some self-medicating going on to relieve stress, and really feeling disconnected from their usual social support. So we're dealing with a lot here. And so I want you to know, like, I'm not coming in and saying, oh, let's just start thinking positive and that should, you know, take care of it just like that. These are things we have to work at. These are things that we need to really pay attention to. And that's why it's really important. That's when I was going to do the conversations, but I'll come over here now to talk about some strategies so that when we're talking about building resilience, this came up in something you were talking about too, Miriam and Betty, this idea of, you know, being strong does not necessarily mean charging through and not feeling anything. So really acknowledging your own feelings is important. How are you feeling about this? The first couple weeks, as you know, we were all trying to figure out what was happening, were really scary for a lot of people. For me, for my family, for lots of families that I knew, no one knew what was happening. And so that was terrifying, which is not a feeling we often feel as adults. The second idea of grounding yourself. This is a great idea of thinking about your physical body. How do you, what are things that you can do so that you can really feel yourself in your body? Because as you're feeling anxious, or you're feeling scared about things, you're feeling depressed, that often means that we're in our heads, right? We're not in our bodies. So what are some things that you can do to help bring that awareness back to your whole body? Sometimes you can do it by just standing outside in your bare feet in the grass or in the dirt. and just helping yourself slow down like that. Normalizing your feelings and responses is really important. Yeah, all of the things I mentioned before are true for so many people. And if this is, if you're somebody who's had previous traumas or really challenging adversity, then some of these feelings might be triggered by past feelings. So it's like you have this backpack of trauma, and it may sort of bring up or make your backpack feel a little bit heavier than before. So some of the things to do are to think about slowing down, being patient with yourself, taking a moment to take a deep breath, unpacking that backpack, taking things out by staying connected to your social circle, to all of your supports. The fourth thing on here is this idea of acknowledging the losses. I mean, losses on every scale, right? So losses of our normal routines, of being able to go into an office or a classroom. Grocery stores are very different now. Those are very different routines that we have. And even thinking about traveling, simple kinds of things, birthday parties, holidays, even going to the movies or hanging out, having dinner with friends. And of course, everything around graduations. For families that do really emphasize the importance of graduations, for children who might be the first in their families to be those graduates, it's really hard to lose that ritual, that sense of what do we get to do? How can we celebrate together? Another thing that we recommend is this idea of really expanding your understanding of cultural humility. There's been, from the first time that we started talking about the pandemic through the last couple weeks, where we've seen people who are protesting in the streets, they're marching, they're really kind of rising up against racial injustice. It's really important not to react in ways that can be, that would reinforce racism or that would support our racist society. So really thinking about what are you doing and how can you participate in ways that you're modeling for your kids, how to get through this situation, through this idea of being, having this cultural humility lens. Engaging in this idea of regular relaxation response activities where you're calming your central nervous system so that your parasympathetic, it's called a relaxation response, is activated so that you're really, really slowing down and you're able to take a break. That's really important. You can do that through meditation, through visualizations. That might be something like repetitive prayer, yoga, Tai Chi, but it's really good so that we can really access this rest and digest system. All right, staying socially connected. Oh, I skipped one. I skipped one of my most important ones. Engaging in regular creative expression. This is a great opportunity to be connected to the kinds of things that you are passionate about, where you feel like you are the most creative. And I don't mean taking a million classes online, but maybe there's something that you might enjoy doing or doing with your children at the same time. So that if they're working on art, can you take a moment and join them and engage in this kind of creative play, because that actually helps you as an adult as well. When I talked about some things around trauma, and I'm going to wrap it up in a moment, but the idea of trauma is traumatic experience create this groove in your brain, like it's reinforcing neural connections. It's exactly the same thing when we talk about positive feelings and positive experiences. So the more often that we're engaged in something that's fun, that's creative, that we feel good about, then you're really developing those neural connections, and you're going to be able to, it strengthens the neural connections and helps you feel more resilient as well. I talked about staying socially connected, being intentional with your media consumption, pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, this idea of increasing gratitude and compassion practices. Really important to start doing now as we're moving through a lot of uncertainty of thinking about. There's a practice. I'll put it in the resources list. The Greater Good Science Center has a number of amazing science-backed and researched practices that you can use for gratitude. And one is specifically called Silver Linings. And it's the idea of how can you look for something positive in a very negative experience or situation. So for example, the loss of not being able to go to do your normal routine, not being able to go to an office or job, see your coworkers, things feel disrupted. Maybe there's a positive lining about not sitting in traffic. Or that globally, by staying at home, we are taking care of our communities. We are preventing the spread of COVID-19, that we are helping our neighbors by following practices. So it's not saying that we're ignoring the negative, right? Because we're still acknowledging all the feelings that come up, but it's a way to also pay attention to something good that might have come out of this. So those are a couple ideas, and I'll put some more of those links to specific practices in the resources page that you can try and that we can talk about later.
Thank you, Sarah. Those are all really great practical tips. I wanted to share a thought that came through at the Q&A as well, just related to the conversation we were having. Basically, honoring that this parent is talking about how they are finding that showing vulnerability to their children, 2 boys, has been tremendously powerful recently. Before, they had a perception that their children needed strong parents, but now they're starting to see, especially now that they're older and they can understand cognitively what's happening, they need to see more than ever that everybody is human with strengths and weaknesses, and that modeling of what adults do to help them cope and help them bounce back, and making that very visible and explicit to our children. Our practice for not ever losing our calm, but being able to regain our calm or to recover from a setback, that modeling is so powerful for them to see that play out, rather than us just speak about it, to see a human go through that. And in particular, how helpful that is for men in our society, because we often gender men into this strength role. So how important that kind of impression can make on our young men as we're raising them.
That's fantastic. And I wanted, thinking about that, I'll just show really quickly one other resource that could be really valuable from the Greater Good Science Center. They have a website called Greater Good in Action, and there are a number of these practices that you can look up, and I really appreciate this one. It's called A Loving Space for Kids' Emotions, and this is a way, so they give you a little bit of information. You can download it or print it out, but it gives you how to do it and then why to try it. It has all of the research behind it, but how to do it, something like this, as little as 10 minutes. When your children are experiencing any kind of strong emotion. So it's a way of acknowledging, not trying to distract them or redirect them, because then that sends the message that having that feeling is not okay. But how do you help them go through it? So it gives you 3 steps. Heighten your awareness. To say, I'm wondering if you're upset, rather than saying you're upset. Naming it, giving them the chance to identify their feelings, or you can help them do it, again, without telling them exactly what it is. And then really explore it together without coming up with solutions for them in that, right in the moment, but helping them explore it. And so this is that same idea where by showing your own vulnerability too, and you can talk about examples of maybe when you've gone through something like that as well. That's a really great way to build that connection and acknowledge the feelings that are going on.
So there's a request to make sure that the resources you're sharing, people are finding them really helpful.
Great.
So I just want to reiterate to everyone that they'll be sent out in a PowerPoint. And then also the one that Sarah was just reviewing is from the Center for Greater Good, that in addition to Acknowledge Alliance, which has a great deal of resources online as well related to resilience, the Center for Greater Good has some great ones in addition to a whole toolkit on being able to build compassion for yourself, which I often think is a necessary skill for us to be able to model resilience rather than just strength, or our interpretation of that. We do have one additional question that's come in, and it talks about the challenges of intergenerationally, it talks about the challenge of raising children in blended cultures, as well as intergenerationally, there are differences if you're raising your child here in a different culture than what you were raised in for yourself. So this question in particular talks about how can you support resilience in children growing up with one parent from a different culture and religion and another parent from a different culture and religion. As a child of that situation, I can say, often just by navigating those differences, you gain a lot of resilience because you have to have a flexible and agile adaptation. But, I would have much rather preferred a more explicit method from my parents in terms of common language and understanding. And so one of the first things, and I know, Sarah, you probably have thoughts on this, is to be able to partner with your partner on what that value and that can look like in your children and in your family, and what kind of language you're going to use in common to reinforce that and be on the same page in terms of this value of resilience, but more importantly, what that looks like in the behavior and the functioning of your family. Sarah, do you have more to talk about with that? Or, I mean, this is a topic I can go on all day about, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I think that for a lot of people, they've grown up with two very different cultures. I also grew up in my parents came from very different cultures themselves, and they found very respectful ways of acknowledging the cultures of each other, and how to just welcome all parts of our family, together, even though we were different. Which sometimes involved taking the Christmas tree down before my Jewish grandmother came over to visit, putting the menorah up. So really thinking about like how I think blending, blending and being respectful. And also, this cultural humility approach is really nice because you are taking a stance of curiosity, of saying, I'm not assuming that I understand everything about someone else's culture, and which leads to assumptions and stereotypes and lots of problems, but really wanting to know more and to be able to say, tell me more about this. And so really handling conflicts when they come up, because conflicts are inevitable, but how do you approach it with kind of this lens of curiosity and helping to understand and navigate those differences, like you were talking about, Miriam.
If I may add a point. So yes, like you said, Miriam and Sarah, in a blended culture, different religion, it's a little different if two parents are from different cultures. But I grew up in a family where even let's say of a liking or a trait, like for example, my father was an atheist and my mother was a very devotional person. Even there, it is a situation where and they existed completely in harmony. You pick up a lot in how they respond to each other, their feelings, and the way they want to run the family as a whole unit. So I think these kind of different or polarizing situations will help build more tolerance as well. In the person processing that, oh, it's not strange. It is not, it's just different. So what do we do to learn, or how do we learn from this? And what do we do? And so when we are faced with a situation where we see diversity in different forms, honestly, where I'm concerned, it doesn't faze me quickly because I'm kind of used to it in a different context. So I think it's important. It is, I think, a great, I would say those are great additional learning points, though they may cause points of, tensions and nervousness and little pressures and stresses sometimes, but still they're extreme good learning points and learning experiences for, even children and even adults to support each other, learn to how to support each other or teach them those things to the children, I feel. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. One of the questions that has helped me the most, both professionally and personally, and even more so in terms of having a response, a trauma-informed response instead of a reaction, is to build a pause in. So I know this moment of pandemic and crisis, and that one of the silver linings, Sarah, that you were kind of referencing is it's forced us all to stop for a bit and pause and, reflect on the parts of our system and our society that aren't functioning, that are problematic, that we need to address. I think there's great benefit that comes, but I do think us individually, if we haven't already, we should be incorporating more regular pauses before we react to our presumptions about situations. And that includes the dynamic in a household where there's very distinct differences. One of the best strategies I've incorporated as I've grown is don't react, pause, wait for it, breathe. There's a whole practice, actually Center for Greater Good has it up there as well. The stop practice, you stop, you take a breath, that's the T. You observe what's happening, and then you proceed. You observe what's happening around you and in your body, and then you proceed with intention. And one of the greatest strategies I have for that intention is to inquire, like Sarah is saying, and this place of inquiry and humility, to ask simply, I saw this. Can you tell me what that meant to you? What does this mean to you? For me, it feels like this from my history of origin, my family, my culture, but what did that mean for you? Because I also think it's important to put on the table what that experience was from your perspective, so that you both can seek some understanding and some improved communication around how we can look at the same thing from very different vantage points and have very different impressions and reactions to it. So I'm looking into the Q&A and I don't see other comments. I'll pause awkwardly the wait time and allow for either my colleagues here or our participants to ask any other questions. And while we're pausing, I'll do a little bit of commercial. We have the second round of the resiliency workshop next week. Sarah can tease a little bit of what will be discussed there. Similar formats, and again, it will be available with recording with resources. That's going to live on the PTA website for easy accessibility, as well as Acknowledge Alliance. I believe we'll have that ability too. So 2 points of access for you all.
I'd just like to add on to what you said, Miriam. Yes, we will be sending the recording and the slides and the material links to all those who have attended today, as well as, like you said, on the PTA website, PTAC website, there will be there's a web page already, so we're trying to fine tune it and make it ready. It will also be disseminated via their individual school sites for all parents, so that even at a later point, you always can come back and look at it. And the idea for us is to share this to the lot of wider audience as well, people who couldn't make it, who wanted to but couldn't join today, and things like that. And I hope that this is helpful in that manner.
And I realize we're out of time, but
yes,
our team is here should there be more questions. But we really want to express gratitude for you all being here to come together to raise your questions, and also a lot of appreciation for making this talk available, and for everyone in Palo Alto And then a lot of valuing of Indira's point of seeing diversity in her family and adapting to that global diversity as well. I think how we navigate differences is how our students are going to learn to navigate them. And with respect, humility, and curiosity, if we can practice that before we respond, that we will by far build a better world than the one that we are currently seeing.
Yes.
I
also like to thank Sarah. She actually divided this and at the starting point as adults, which is, I think, very important, because whether we like it or not, I've always noticed I have a teenager and a tweener, so 11 and 13. So I've always noticed children, even if they're younger, like in 5 or 6 years, or even if they're in high school, like 17, 18 years, unconsciously or consciously, they look up at how the parents behave, how the parents react, what the parents say. Teenagers are in an awkward, physiologically, developmentally, they're in a situation where they don't want to be with the parents or, anywhere closer, but they are watching and observing. Therefore, us role modeling is very, very important in any aspect of SEL, actually. Even in adversity, how we understand, first we need to understand how are we handling it, how are we showing our acceptance or understanding or response to it. Children automatically pick up from that. So I think it's a great thing that you did, Sarah, that starting off with adults first, you build your capacity, and none of us are perfect. This whole thing is a shocker to all of us. We never expected, these things to happen. And, I always say things like resiliency and accidents, you can never plan for them. They just land land in front of you, and you just have to learn to roll with it. And I think all of us learn from each other, from our friends, from our peers, our own, co-workers, how they adapt, and that's how we also learn. And I think, thank you for that. I mean, thank you for, I like the way, the whole presentation, going slide by slide of, separating it out, going in analyzing ourselves, and then, from there we all can, because each of our families are different. How we do things are different, and it will be because we're different people. But the format is great. I think I like that. Thank you much, Sarah.
Your point, I think your point, Indira, that kids often don't listen to what you say, but they do pay attention to what you do.
Yeah.
So important
Exactly.
that if you expect them to be resilient or to take a pause before they react, or if they're having big emotions,
True.
for that to manage it, then we as adults have to first do that, because we can't teach them what we don't practice and what we don't have for ourselves. So just a great emphasis. Well, I know our time is over, but we really appreciate you all being with us. I know that there's a lot of commentary in the chat about the appreciation of the conversation related to modeling, and how we cope is how we teach our students and our young kids to cope, right?
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. We hope that you're able to join us next Thursday, same channel or same time. It should be the same link. If I'm dating myself, same bat time, same bat channel.
Yes.
I just want to point out to that effect that and to be mindful of, even though you have access to the link, that you still have to register on Eventbrite, because there will be others who will be, maybe didn't make it this time, but will have already, and we only have 100 slots, so, or 97 slots. So
Yes.
mindful of, although you have access to the Zoom link, please register on Eventbrite, because tonight's event sold out, and it would be very disappointing to some people who have already registered if they couldn't make it because others have LinkedIn.
Important point. Additionally, please look out for that email. There will be a feedback component that we're hoping that if you have feedback or questions, that will then inform the design of next week's session.
Yes.
So please look out for that and complete that. And just, it gives us great information about whether or not what we're trying to do is meeting the needs of our families in the community. So.
Yep, there should be a survey link as soon as you close the webinar. Fingers crossed to get it right away.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to end our session, partially because it pains me to watch everybody slowly exit. And with all of the jokes going around about the awkward meme, the awkward moments at the end of Zoom. But again, our great gratitude for you joining us and for making this space in your time.
Yes.
To
Yes.
expand your knowledge, your capacity, or just reiterate what you already know and then try to draw your attention back to it so you can put it at the forefront of your focus. We appreciate that. Thank you all. And to our panelists, thank you so much for the time and the partnership to make this possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. See you next week.
Yeah.